Bien sûr, ouais, c'est clair.
C'est le futur, donc à partir de là, on est obligé.
since we're going to be hosting events, Polkadot tonight, ETHCC staking tomorrow, and Polkadot Network on Thursday. And this is shared offices with crypto startups. We have ETHCC, which is a crypto fund, Pigalle, or even Mongrove, which is a DEX, and SkillZ. So at SkillZ, we are a staking provider. We deploy more than 4,000 validators on many networks, but not Polkadot yet. So if you're interested to stake on Polkadot, please come to us. And yeah, we're super happy tonight to welcome Valeria, DeFi Alliance, and the whole Polkadot ecosystem. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you all for coming and kicking off ETHCC with us tonight. I am one of the co-founders of Polkadot DeFi Alliance. We kicked this off at the end of last year. And essentially, Polkadot DeFi Alliance is just a collective of leading Polkadot projects. We do educational events monthly. And in the future, we intend to do other things as cities and countries open up more, participate with hackathons, and et cetera. So tonight, we're going to hear from 3 amazing people that support the ecosystem in various ways. One of them is Etienne. Please come on stage. So Etienne has a fund called TRGC. He's based in the Netherlands, and I have been collaborating with him throughout the entire last year, referring promising projects to his fund, and his fund supports many of the good Polkadot projects. And then we have Kenny from Polkadot Network. Come on up, all the way from Boston. And we love working with Kenny at Polkadot DeFi Alliance. He's one of our pillars in the ecosystem as far as the US-based projects. And last but not least, we have Elliot, who today will be representing 2 companies, Ternoa and Nodal. He's an advisor to Ternoa, which is a project here in France. He's French. He's joining us all the way from France, and he will speak to the different applications of Polkadot substrate within both of the projects. And then Nodal is a company that was founded by Misha Benolier. It's a San Francisco company, and it's been around. It's one of the older Polkadot projects who built a standalone substrate chain. So anyways, I'll give it over to Etienne to continue this discussion. Please stick around to the end, and if you have any questions, the panelists will answer. Thank you.
All right, guys, welcome. We're trying to keep this loose. It's like we're home. But as we're infiltrating an Ethereum event, there's already 1 maxi in the room. So we'll try to be friendly. Thanks so much for the host, the ETHCC team, SkillZ, a lot of great people. Thank you so much for hosting us in your city. Question for anyone in the room. Who had the worst experience getting in the city? Like, I know Kenny had to strangle a customs agent. You want to share that story?
Sure, yeah. So I was almost didn't get in because I had left my vaccine card at home. My assumption was that as long as I could show that I tested negative, then I don't have to bring my vaccine card with me. And, a vaccine card is like your passport now, so you don't want to take it everywhere you don't have to. And so I got to the customs agent, and it was like, okay, can I see your vaccine card? I'm like, no, but I have this, printout from CVS, which is like a pharmacy in the U.S. And he's like, oh, well, this doesn't count. Does it have a QR code I can scan to validate? I'm like, no, I don't. And he's like, okay, well then, you have to be here on business. And I was like, oh yeah, I am here on business. I'm here for the ETHCC conference. He's like, okay, so show me your ticket. I'm like, I don't have a ticket. It's all sold out. So he was like, okay, well, if you can't prove, that you're here for business and you don't have your vaccine card, then, we're going to have to send you back to the States. And so he set me aside. And then this family came up after me. And they were speaking French and all that, and so I didn't understand what was going on, but they had their own personal problems. And they were raising quite a few issues with the customs officer, so he had to bring 2 or 3 more people there. And so while they were causing that ruckus, I went back in and I was like, hey, I can't show you my ticket right now because I don't have internet and we're in the airport. But here's a picture, a screenshot of one of my calendar events for one of the little after parties. And he was like, oh, should I be talking about this live? I have an official Ethereum ticket.
Yeah, lawyer up, mate, lawyer up. Get a lawyer.
I'm glad to be here on business.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I live in Paris, so, didn't have much issues, but
Not much issues? Okay. Awesome.
except the swabbing,
Okay.
antigen testing, something. Anyways,
It's daily now?
it's terrible.
Okay, gotcha. All right, let's kick it off. So we want to give more context and background on these guys. I know Kenny is with Manta. It's a great meeting, Elliot. So if we could kick it off with Elliot, what is Ternoa? And maybe if you could touch upon what is Nodal Network.
Okay. So maybe let's start with Ternoa.
Yeah.
So to put it, in a reasonable time frame, Ternoa is rethinking the way we handle NFTs. Today, if you have an NFT, it represents ownership of something. But Ternoa is adding another layer that allows us to make sure that only the owner of an NFT can actually access the content of the NFT, meaning that the NFT can be used to, for instance, send data somewhere, or program it to trigger itself when an event happens so that somebody else is going to receive the data. Or if you sell art, to make sure that only the buyer of your NFT can actually unlock the actual work that you've done, which can be very useful if you want, for instance, to have art that you can 3D print, something like that. And if we go to Nodal, which is a second company I represent today, Nodal is, as Valeria said, one of the very first substrate projects in the ecosystem. I think we're one of the first teams to join the Builders program, one of the first teams to launch substrate standalone chain 1.5 years ago or so. And we are set to change the way we connect IoT devices, meaning that people can use a Nodal network with, which is powered by smartphones and apps and stuff like that, in order to find, locate, connect, and communicate with IoT devices without any internet connection.
Awesome.
That's it for the nerdy talk.
Awesome. Kenny, if you could tell us a bit about what is Manta Network, what are you guys trying to achieve?
Sure, I have a question, actually, because you told me Nodal started 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, 3 to 4 years.
Isn't that around the time of the Polkadot whole offering? How far along were you guys, or did you just start it right the next day?
Yeah, so that's the trick. We actually first launched. We were not on on Polkadot first. Our first year was actually on Stellar, which is very good for payments, but we wanted to do more. And so 1 year later, I think we started building on Polkadot, right around when, a bit before we did the switch from Substrate V1 to Substrate V2, for the technical people here. Since then we've been on Polkadot / Substrate and did some bridging work and all the dirty work to migrate safely away from Stellar.
Yeah, totally curious about the switch from Stellar to Polkadot, but a little bit about Manta Network. So we're building a privacy layer within the Polkadot ecosystem, and so as part of that, right, we have our own sort of suite of products and services. And the real big differentiator between what we're building out and what you kind of see existing in the market today, like Zcash or something, is essentially, if I wanted to send 10 DOT to any of you right now, how do I send it with Zcash? I essentially have to use their token within their own ecosystem. Whereas on Manta Network, right, we're allowing you to privatize any parachain asset. This means that I can send DOT to you very easily. I can send any sort of stable coin to you very easily. And so yeah, there's the payment side, and there's the decentralized exchange, which is also privatized as well. But the bigger picture here is that we definitely want to be that privacy provider in the entire Polkadot space. What we see right now is that projects, they shouldn't have to have in-house cryptographers just to build out their own sort of privacy layer for the use cases that they're building, right? So having that sort of plug-and-play abstraction, that's the sweet spot that we're going for.
Awesome. To loosen up everyone in the room a bit, I wanted to ask you guys one question. Who's not familiar with the Polkadot substrate ecosystem? By show of hands. Like, I'm totally blank. Okay, if you guys could like tell these people what is the actually difference or the additional value the substrate ecosystem is adding to this whole decentralized future. If you could put it in a nutshell, nuts and bolts to people, what is that value? What made everyone, why are we here? What made everyone so excited about it, to invest in it myself or to build it? So what's happening here besides, because I remember like a week ago I was on a call with this guy, it's like, yeah, it's all hype. I'm like, sure. So what would be your answer to that? What is that big thing about the Polkadot ecosystem that folks don't know about?
Me? Okay. Sure. So, why are we all here? I guess I ask myself that question every day. It's very
Don't get
philosophical.
too existential on that. The why of life.
But so yeah, Polkadot in a nutshell. I think I take two perspectives on that. Like one is the technical differentiator, and the other is the ecosystem differentiator. From the technical side, right? Like just to kind of make it as colloquial as possible. If you think about Ethereum, right, like you can imagine everything on Ethereum, a decentralized application built on top of the EVM. That's the VM layer that like runs everything. It's like your operating system, right? So like if you have a Mac, you have your Mac, and then you run like, I don't know, Microsoft Office, and then Microsoft Word, and then Photoshop, and then Call of Duty, and then other video games and all that stuff. But like once you run enough video games, right, all of a sudden your Mac starts heating up and the fan starts spinning. You don't have the M1 processor. And so, like essentially it's the machine trying to keep up with the entire workload. And that's kind of what we've seen with Ethereum. Definitely Ethereum's working on solutions to solve that, right? And I think Polkadot, being co-founded by one of the co-founders of Ethereum, right, like had a different sort of vision of kind of solving that. And so the way that Polkadot works, if you think about like, Ethereum being like a Mac OS with applications running on top of it, Ethereum is essentially just giving every single project their own laptop, and you're just running it yourself, right? So I guess another analogy is like the difference between mining Bitcoin with a GPU while playing other video games, or mining Bitcoin with like an ASIC. Right, so like specifically designed to run these I guess layer one chains, protocols, and so I kind of allude to layer one, right? Like that's another main difference between Ethereum and Polkadot. In that Ethereum, you're just running a decentralized application, but on Polkadot, you're running an entire network. So that's on the technical side. On the ecosystem side, like I think Polkadot, especially right now, and it kind of goes back to your comment about hype, right? Because like I don't think this is a personality trait that's unique to Polkadot, but when an ecosystem first develops, like all the teams, all the projects really band together, right? There's not really any competition because the pie is huge, right? The market is huge, and so like even if there's other projects doing the same thing, there's ways to collaborate. And I don't think like at least from our experience at Manta, we haven't really met any project that we're just like, oh, like it just doesn't make sense to collaborate. Maybe because of like our privacy offering too, but because the ecosystem's so new, right? Like I think it's a lot more welcoming, and that's not to say that other projects aren't, right? But like I'm just saying that Polkadot is too. So welcome.
I like it. Well, personally, I like to think of Polkadot. I like to compare Polkadot to what happened early on in the history of the internet. For we are all very young. I personally, didn't live it, but very early on, there was only separated networks. Like when you were at a university, you would use your university network and done. That's all. Like data will not really transit between networks unless you bring a floppy disk or something. And essentially, that's what the blockchain ecosystem is currently. We're all building on a given platform, and it is still very, very tricky to communicate between each platform, meaning that, if you build on Ethereum, you are, I don't want to say stuck, but like, you're on Ethereum. You can't really cooperate with another chain, which, what if you wanted to integrate with a project on Tezos? Maybe they both have interesting properties and you kind of want to mix both projects in one product. Well, today you can't. But if you look at Polkadot, the core offering of Polkadot is really to be a way to interconnect blockchains, to interconnect Ethereum apps or shards, I guess, one day, with substrate chains or with a Tezos chain or with anything else. And I do see it as very similar to what the internet did for us today, which is that it interconnected all our networks. It allowed us to make data flow seamlessly and to make sure that we can browse Google without having to be on the university mainframe. And so if we circle back to Polkadot, once you have a Polkadot integrated chain or a Polkadot enabled bridge, you would then be able to integrate more or less seamlessly with other projects, meaning that if I take the example of Nodal or Ternoa, both of them are substrate chains, which means that as a property of our own chains, we could integrate with another substrate chain, like a Kala, like Menta, if we want ZK-based privacy or security transactions. And we can do that only because we are integrating with Polkadot. And we could not do that if we are going to build on one single given blockchain, like Ethereum, like Tezos, like whatever, you name it. Get the idea.
Okay, thanks for that. At this stage, anyone with questions in Pascal? I know you have questions, Pascal.
How far is the ecosystem?
Fair question. The question is, how far is the ecosystem as of today?
I think there's some parity people that are in the room that might have a better. So that's a really good question, right? And I think that definitely, there's the theory versus the implementation side, and the implementation side has not caught up entirely to the theory. So things like the cross-chain communication, right, uses XCMP. That's not fully flushed out right now. And so a lot of this is very manual. And then when you think about even, I guess, just standardization, right? Like even if someone wanted to list a token on an exchange or something, right? Like there's no standard for Polkadot-based tokens. And so it becomes very hard for an exchange to just cookie cutter list all the tokens because, now one looks like a pig and another looks like an elephant, right? And so, there's standardization that needs to be optimized, and then there's the actual implementation that needs to be optimized as well for the cross-chain communication. And so definitely, right, like, being completely honest here, Polkadot is not there yet. But that being said, right, like we are, I think like one of the first major signs that like is, I guess one of the first major signs of progress has been the Kusama parachain auctions, right? Because like parachain auctions is like the bread and butter of all of the Polkadot ecosystem. For those of you that aren't familiar, right, like if you're on another chain, the way that you work is you build an application, launch it on mainnet, pay some fee, and bam, it's out there in the world. Right? With Polkadot, it's a little bit different. There are ways that you can just build and all that stuff too, but the main differentiator here is the parachain. And so the parachain is essentially like your ticket to play in the Polkadot ecosystem. But in order to play in the Polkadot ecosystem, you have to bid for that ticket. But before, I guess, the Kusama parachains, which I guess for those of you that aren't familiar with Kusama, it started off as a test network for Polkadot. It evolved into other things, but we don't have to get into that right now, or you can get into it in a sec if you want to. But I think the big like milestone here is that the Kusama auctions have actually started. The parachains are actually functional, right? So like that has been like the big milestone in the whole, I guess, Polkadot / Kusama ecosystem. But yeah, definitely, there's still a lot of kinks to work out.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with what was said. Kind of don't want to deal too much with the Kusama bullet. Let's call that a canary net. I think Parity likes to call that a canary net. But just to go back to the ecosystem question, I do agree. Like, I think it is still very not initially new, but it is nascent, meaning that we still need to do some work for it to see it fully in production. Parachain seems to be stable currently on Kusama, but many projects are still waiting. They're either waiting for a slot to open on Kusama so that they can run on it, or they're waiting for Polkadot to enable the parachain feature so that they will be straight on Polkadot, or they're waiting for a better time. We do have some projects that seem to be live currently. I'm thinking of, well, obviously Nodal, which has a mainnet running, but also I believe Darwinia, which is enabling bridges between different chains. I mean, which kind of go back to what I was saying previously about bridging both worlds, meaning that you could have a dApp on Polkadot that can talk to Ethereum, for instance. And I believe Reef is as well in a mainnet state currently. From what I know of, these are the only 3 projects that I know of that are currently live. When you look at the other, it seems like everybody's just waiting to be a parachain or to be an alternative, from what I know. And so in some way, people are waiting. I do know there's a parachain auction that happens once every week, which means that technically on Kusama, one new project is onboarded every week, so that the rollout can be, progressive. But then, people have to wait for their slot, and they have to expect their community to support them and to make sure that they stake tokens in their favor, so that they can get a parachain slot. Otherwise, it gets pretty expensive.
Awesome.
Actually, I have a really interesting point to add, which is what you brought up. That's another differentiator, and I think this kind of illustrates a difference between like Polkadot and other projects, right? Like you had mentioned standalone chains. You don't actually have to be a Polkadot parachain to exist as, I guess, kind of a Polkadot project, right? Because like you need to be a parachain in order to like facilitate that smooth the communication. But if you wanted to, right, the framework that people use to build Polkadot projects, Substrate, it can launch as its own sort of standalone chain and your own sort of ecosystem, network, etc.
Yeah, thanks for that. Something you said, Elliot, I wanted to touch upon that, something you finished with, about community supporting your project for the crowd loan. Maybe if you could dig into what you guys have done, strategy to mobilize the community, maybe even expand it to get this going. You don't have to share the in-house strategy secrets, but if you could share a bit, it would be awesome.
Well, yeah, I'm going to give you like, I guess, a lawyer-ish reply, which would be like a lot, I guess, every project has lots of similarities, like it's all based on communities. For the audience, like in the event you don't know like what a crowd loan is or a parachain auction is, if you really want to be a parachain on Kusama today and Polkadot one day, you have to bid for a slot. And due to the demand, because Polkadot is an ecosystem that's growing very quickly and there's only a limited number of slots, due to that demand, you have to like bring a lot of money. And one of the ways projects are thinking about it is that they are asking their community to lock tokens for them as a way to bid for a parachain slot, which is similar to ICOs back in 2017, with the main difference being that the funds locked by your community actually do not go in your pocket, they're actually sent back to the community. Now to go back to your question, since we are all asking our communities to help us get the slots. It's all based on making your community grow and making sure that you put the proper incentive structures in place, meaning that quite a few projects are building referral programs, which we can discuss them another day, or at least ways where if you give 1 Kusama for the Kusama parachain auction campaign, maybe you will get a few tokens from the project. In the case of Nodal and Ternoa, both projects are, I would say, have different strategies on it. If I think of Ternoa, we are still like building everything. I believe we have lots of things to announce very soon, so I won't dive too much, like give too many details. In the case of Nodal, things are a bit more tricky because we are a standalone chain, and one of the current issues with building on top of Substrate and Polkadot is that it's not so easy to transform a standalone chain into a parachain. It involves lots of technical issues, which I don't want to make things, very boring. But basically, it may mean that we have to think a bit more about bridging or having a parachain and a standalone chain bridge together.
Gotcha. Kenny?
Do you want to?
Anything that Manta has done specifically to like ignite the community to expand the support in the crowd loans?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, in expanding the community, I can tell you one of the biggest mistakes we made, and it's what I was telling you about earlier, which was, so I come from cloud computing like years ago, probably around like, yeah, a really long, embarrassing time, but it's a very B2B centric space, right? So, it's like if I gave you guys an activity to like patch or make an entire roof this size of only the objects in this room, right? And then the challenge is like when it rains, there shouldn't be like a droplet or something that comes through. And like, yeah, sure, maybe like a roof this size is okay, right? But like when you're thinking about B2C, like business to consumer, right? Like the roof is the size of a soccer stadium. Right, and so like you still have only the objects in this room, so it becomes infinitely harder, and that's it. I see it echo in a lot of the decisions we make. Right, like if you miss one minor detail, it will be exploited. And this is not just from the cybersecurity side; it's from the community side as well. And so one of the details that we missed, right? We recently launched like our ambassador program because like everyone's got ambassador programs to build communities and all that. And we said, you know what? Like one of the cool things that we're gonna let people do that everyone does is just like like tweets and retweet our tweets and all of that. And so then all of a sudden we get this flood of like bots from like, one person signs up and they create like 200 like Twitter accounts and they're all liking and retweeting. And then all of a sudden we're getting messages from all of our like, investors, advisors, and they're like, hey, why am I getting like 600 retweets on this one tweet I made 3 months ago that said, okay? So like that's like one of the big community mistakes. And so like I only say this because like if any of you guys are thinking about like your community building, right, like definitely go into all the details and play all the game theory out and make sure that you have all your bases covered. Like these things, they just trickle in like little drips. In terms of the actual community building for the Kusama parachain auction, we actually started that today. So we just announced our plans for our PLO strategy today. So I can't really tell you what's working or what's not, but ask me in like 48 hours and I'll find the drips. Yeah.
Okay, definitely tap into that. All right, any questions from this gentleman?
It was mentioned earlier that there's no difficulties with accessing NFTs. And you're working on trying to access the content of NFTs. What's the actual difficulty? What's the challenge?
Well, the challenge is that the point is to make it in a decentralized way and to make it non-custodial, meaning that in order to unlock or decrypt actually the content of an NFT, you do not want to have to rely on a single third party. And that is the main challenge that Ternoa is optimizing for. By using, it's called trusted execution environments. It's basically a very specific kind of technology made by Intel mostly, called Intel AGX. There's a few others, but like Intel is better. And we are using this trusted execution environment, and we are able to verify that a node is running the correct piece of code that was certified by Ternoa. that is, the last version, and that is running correctly in a genuine chip or laptop. And once we can verify that, we can make sure that the nodes execute what we would call trusted code, meaning that it's not a piece of code that's validated by the chain consensus. It has to be verified by the fact that we use that trusted execution environment. And to keep it short, because that can get very deep and very complex and very, very boring, we can use that to make sure that decryption keys for NFT content are handled correctly. And we cannot do that without trusted execution environments, or maybe the case if we find some crazy cryptographers. We cannot do that on a pure chainware in a pure decentralized way, because if you have the keys stored somewhere on your blockchain, a blockchain is public. You can see the keys. So if you have the keys, you can decrypt the content. And so the content can be decrypted by anyone. And so, we break, we cannot achieve what we wanted to do.
Does that answer your question? Awesome. Any more questions from the crowd? Gil?
Well, I have like a couple, as a viewer.
Shoot away.
Couple, but maybe it's too technical, but like what I would like to hear from Menthan is always like how it works like in higher layer. So you send like some coins to your product chain, and then you just
Sorry, someone else is trying to talk over you right now. So rude.
Yeah, Gil, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, but how it works like in the higher layer, your Menthan network. So you send some assets to your product chain, and then like you do your thing, and then like and you just mint in another product chain like your assets, or how does it work?
Yeah, I guess on a high level, that's exactly it. So you answered your own question. But we go a step deeper. I'm just kidding. So it is, you're right. So we wrap tokens. I guess you can send like USDT, because like USDT is like the big thing on Polkadot, or will soon to be. So let's use that as a neutral example. You can send USDT over to Menthan Network, in which case, we wrap a privatized version on our chain, and we actually have, and I guess this is another good point, we actually have wallet addresses, so a UTXO model, which means that a user, like if I were to send you 10 USDT privately, you can then send that 10 USDT to like someone else, or like 8 to someone and 2 to someone, or like whatever, right? Like there's this perpetual cycle, right? So you never have to necessarily exit the network unless for some reason you want to unprivatize those tokens again, right? And that's pretty different from like I guess an Ethereum model, where you're still dependent on the Ethereum wallet, and so by the time I send my transaction to you, you have to redeem it, right? It has to be public again, and then you can privatize again and send again. Yes, and then at any point in time, right, you can unwrap it as well, as long as you hold the private assets. But that's essentially how we work in a nutshell.
Do you see a future where your solution could survive or could evolve to a non-wrapped, like without wrapping the coins in chains, but like interacting with multiple chains in your product chain? So like, do you see a future like with zero proofs or whatever, or you think that this is a true business?
Yeah, actually, we use zero-knowledge proofs. But yes, there is a future with other parachain assets. It's not exactly that simple right now, especially for the reasons that I just mentioned about like the cross-chain communication limitations. So it's a very manual process. But essentially, right, like we are working with some projects right now that I'll keep under wraps because we're also on the internet. That we're trying to test out, continuing to use the privatized version of those tokens to interact within their actual ecosystems. So definitely we're bullish on that. I guess that's the term.
I think you guys should hook up after the meeting, because he's got particular spicy opinions about wrap tokens. I remember from our call a few weeks ago. Right?
I mean, yeah, I agree. From a user experience perspective, right, like it's a necessary evil, at least at this point in time. But the ideal scenario, definitely.
Okay, awesome. Beautiful. See, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Next question, anyone? You can tweet it, send it out. All right.
Send it as an anonymous NFT through Ternoa.
Elliot, you and before we got this started, you were talking about your relationship and partnership with the Swiss-based Polkadot startup Integrity. If you could maybe expand what the partnership is briefly from a technical perspective.
Well,
because Kenny mentioned about within this ecosystem, there's a lot of composability. You can partner up easy with other projects. There's not a lot of like real infighting or competition happening. If you could touch upon that as an example of how that happens.
Yes. So that's for Ternoa. And in the case of Ternoa, since we use that IntelliGX technology, we had to build a way to integrate a substrate node with that precise set of technology. And that's not easy to do, and so we decided to not reinvent the wheel and work with existing components from the ecosystem. And to do that, we reached out to a very well-known team in the ecosystem called SCS for short, and they built a project called Substrat T with 2 E at the end. And the point of Substrat T is to be not a framework, but at least a set of modules that you can add to a substrate chain so that you can communicate and work with the IntelliGX technology. And that's essentially what we're doing. We are using Substrat T to work with that. But on top of that, Integrity is probably going to become a parachain. That is a parachain from the Substrat T team. And the point of Integrity is to serve as an attestation layer for trusted execution environment on top of Polkadot, meaning that fuse chips or IntelliGX-enabled nodes or software could be registered on Integrity in order to prove that they are legit, that they run the correct code, that the correct hardware is being used. And Integrity will be in charge of verifying that with Intel and with different sets of processes and protocols. And back to Ternoa now, since Ternoa is working with Substrat T, we would be able to integrate with Integrity in order to use their attestation layer so that we can avoid having to rely on Intel to work with IntelliGX. And the loop will be looped and we will be, I guess, fully decentralized.
Awesome.
I get
Beautiful.
why it's called Integrity and Substrate
T, yeah.
Okay.
Just a mess because you mix them up.
But it's a nice pun.
Yeah.
It is.
All right, Kenny, same for you.
I think
go ahead.
just a fun fact, right? Like, I'm pretty sure everyone's phones has secure enclaves, TE environments, right? So like, if you're worried about Apple, stealing your face and recognizing your fingerprint, right? Like Apple doesn't actually own all that data. All that data stays within your actual phone in that TE environment. And so it's kind of like exactly what you were describing earlier about like you can't have unencrypted data or just raw data on chain because other people have access to it, right? It's the same principle at like Apple. Apple doesn't want access to it because it's a privacy concern. So they just store your data on the phone, right? And then all that sort of verification happens within your TE environment. So, you guys are basically running security systems just like they are.
So same question for you, Kenny. Maybe if you could share an example of a project within the ecosystem you collaborate with a lot, where there is some win-win situation happening, something on the top of your head?
Yeah, sure. I think, when we talk about privacy, especially to DeFi projects, there's a lot of interest, right? Because, being able to view people's wallet addresses. We actually did this study where we asked 400 people in the crypto space, traders, investors, basically everyone touching, and you were part of that study, right? So you remember that, thank you. And so basically people were telling us essentially like, hey, of course we look at other people's wallet addresses. Of course we look at their assets, no brainer, right? But if you really think about it, it's such a confusing perspective because if I wanted to access your bank account and view your funds right now, right, I have to commit identity fraud, or I have to go on Facebook and copy your information, right, because that has all your identity in it. But if I were to do it on chain, all I need is your wallet address, right? So there's this huge sort of invasion of privacy that is currently acceptable on chain, but I don't think that is going to still be the case in like 10 years, right? Especially if you think about the scalability side. You know, you could be a blockchain minimalist and, you know, 10 years it doesn't even matter. But in the case that it does, right, privacy is definitely needed. And so the reason I say that is because, you know, when we talk with other projects, especially in the DeFi space, the response is overwhelmingly positive, right, to be able to have that sort of privacy integration into their existing applications. And so, yeah, I mean, we're working on like a weekly basis, building out technology with different projects in the Polkadot ecosystem. I don't want to name them because we're on the internet, but like if it was just you guys, I swear I would. Yeah, so it's there. And then even outside of the Polkadot ecosystem, we have a lot of interest. Very large decentralized exchanges that are also moving into Polkadot. Very large lending platforms that are exploring Polkadot, right? Like as soon as they hit Polkadot and they know, oh, there's privacy that can be implemented here for our application, right? Like they're just very excited.
All right. Privacy is a topic, don't get me started, but I'll try. Question, show of hands, let's vote. Who thinks privacy is dead? Forget about it. We have Facebook, Google, so why bother? Or, hey, there's still some hope left. Let's keep working on it. Show of hands. Who thinks privacy is dead? Like, forget about it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in general, there's a lot of people in the room. I would say people that think it's not dead, it's still something to fight for. Who still has a Facebook account? You people are hopeless.
It depends what you put on there, right?
That's
But
the problem.
it doesn't even matter if you have a Facebook account.
Yeah.
Facebook builds shadow profiles. So
Yeah.
like they have profiles on people that don't exist on Facebook.
Yeah. It's definitely a thing. You mentioned about the wallet addresses. It's a good friend of mine. He's a trader, a large trader on FTX. And he is so paranoia because he thinks, like you talked about 10 years, he says, as this industry keeps expanding, there's going to be something coming up in the near future called will doxing, right? Like you have these wallets. Actually, if you go on the internet, there's like full list of like project founders, full project wallets and everything on there, right? So it's already a reality, right? You better hurry up with Manta, mate. Okay, so question for the crowd. Hearing these stories, what these gentlemen are doing, first, did you guys like grasp what's happening? Or if you did, if you're like, okay, maybe you guys would take this in this direction, maybe a tip, trick, or something they haven't. It could be anything, community building, the crowd loans, or Gil with the rep tokens, anything on their blind spot, a tip or a trick.
I think definitely with the way the industry is heading, blockchain interoperability is a big issue. It's a big question. We've had the initial process of everyone coming along, getting excited about distinct blockchains, and then sort of discovered that in terms of partnerships, in terms of developing other kind of protocols, working with different kind of consensus mechanisms, you just have to bring in some form of interoperability. So what Gavin Woods and Polkadot is trying to do is very interesting. It was a very bold move to move away from Ethereum. It could have gone terribly wrong.
Who knows? I mean, the story's not over yet.
Yeah, for sure, right?
No. So I mean that's my take on it. I would still wonder how quickly would the technology mature in terms of the day-to-day clients or consuming. That's what I would think, because if you have a really big project come along, you have a massive traction build up, can the technology keep pace with it? Or would it be one of those traditional situations where CryptoKitties comes on, Ethereum got congested, or we're going off to another blockchain? You know, would that be the next story of Polkadot? So that's the question that I would have on it.
Interesting. Interesting. Thanks for that. Last question for you guys separately. Where do you see Manta or Ternoa in 2 years? The unpredictable, the knowns unknowns.
All right, so there's where we will be, and then there's where we want to head. So I'll talk about the beautiful vision of where we want to head, and hopefully they'll cross paths. So right now, like one of the things that we notice is that in privacy, user experience matters, right? So like, I was talking about Zcash earlier, right? If you look at like Zcash transactions, I guess like a vast majority of them aren't even private, right? People aren't even using Zcash for its intended purpose. And this isn't because people don't want privacy, but if you just look at Zcash, you might think, oh, people don't care about privacy. Well, no, that's not true. They care about privacy, but they care more about like fast user experience. And so, when you look on like Ethereum and you see all of the privacy projects there, like Tornado Cash and Aztec, and you see this heavy volume moving through, it's like, it's a proof point that people are willing to use privacy if it kind of, gets into that threshold of that user experience that they're willing to have. And so where we're going with that is essentially, we want to bring that ultimate user experience to the Polkadot ecosystem in the sense that, there's two major things that we focus on. One is partnerships with other projects within the ecosystem, because the closer we can bring our technology to their existing application, right, the less the user has to jump from their application to our network on our website or something and then go back there, right? And so being able to integrate directly onto those applications is something that we're very focused on. And the second thing that we're very focused on is wallet integration. So, everyone's got wallets, right? And, I don't think Ledger's going to be supporting us anytime in the next 6 months, maybe 7 months, but no, I'm just kidding. There's no plans. But other smaller ecosystem-specific projects like Polkadot.js, right? Like even projects that are spinning up their own chains on Polkadot that were just wallets before, like MathChain. Having these wallets support and having privacy integrated as a potential option onto these types of wallets, right? Like that dramatically decreases the friction for the user. Just being able to go to your wallet, like click privatize, and then it's there, right? Like I think that's the sort of privacy user experience that we're trying to go for. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
it might not work with wrap tokens, I'm sorry.
Question for both of you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, in the case of Ternoa, well, first of all, in 2 years we will be live and usable. I mean, we want to be, and we do plan to be, and that's on our roadmap, which is public. Hopefully, otherwise, I'm going to have a bad time in.
Your public roadmap says that you want to build something that works.
It's pretty good, huh? But on top of that, I personally believe that we, as an ecosystem, not just as a project, we are only scratching the surface of what we can do with NFTs. Today, and I'm opinionated on that thing, but today we can mostly use NFTs only for art or collectibles. And that's fine, but you can do so much more with NFTs. You can tokenize IP and put it in a decentralized organization. And have the decentralized organization own the actual IP and use it for later, or sell it, or enforce it maybe on a decentralized court if we want to be a bit crazy. Or you can also tokenize proper data that you want to send to somebody. That's what we're optimizing for at Ternoa. But then again, the data can be art, luxury. How about watch certificates? I mean, I see quite a few watches here and there. When we buy watches, normally you have a serial number and you have, a piece of paper that you are supposed to keep somewhere and to probably, take in picture in order to prove that you do own the watch and that if it is stolen, maybe you can't claim it back, but at least you can mark it as stolen and hopefully someone will bring back your watch. I don't think it ever worked, but, it's here for that. Well, today that's, first of all, that's paper. Everybody loses it. It's ink, so it's probably going to disappear in a few years anyways if you don't keep it correctly. And let's be honest, nobody ever uses it and nobody ever enter the serial numbers and the certificates on the manufacturer website. I mean, I did it once, when I was bored, but otherwise, I don't do it. Well, think about the case where if you buy your watch or your Chanel bag or whatever, instead of getting that piece of paper and a serial number, maybe you could receive an NFT straight into your wallet. And only you can access this authenticity certificate. That's not just an NFT that says, hey, you own a Chanel bag. That's an NFT that you can claim and open, and inside there is a PDF of that said certificate with everything you need in order to claim it back if needed, or to prove that you booked it, I don't know, like at Galerie Lafayette or something. I do see that as a stronger use case for NFTs, and I do also see that as a kind of use cases for which China will be very good, because of that technology that allows us to, decrypt and encrypt NFTs and make sure that only the owner of the NFT can actually access the data. And that's really what we will be shooting for in the upcoming years. Hopefully, we'll have more things to announce, but I'll keep it at that.
So you're going to make NFTs from COVID vaccinations?
Well, I spoke about that last year, I think, but it seems like, the way things are progressing are mostly paper-based, and it seems like working with governments takes years, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to take like 5 to 10 years to convince them to use something more or less digital and more or less cryptographic. So I don't think there will be COVID certificates as NFTs, because we're too early, and hopefully the COVID crisis will be done next year or so. Hopefully, touching wood. So I don't think in that case, NFTs will be used, but they could,
Yeah,
why
for
not?
sure.
I mean, same, your certificate could be in the NFT that only you can unlock.
Exactly. Last question. Anyone?
I have like a question, like follow up in the developer tools, because both of you mentioned about a user experience. It's pretty important, like for privacy, for NFTs, for everything. So what I see like nowadays is that the right way of doing things is to think about use cases, think about the user experience, like in what are you going to build to reach there. However, I see some projects in this ecosystem that they're hit a wall, because sometimes you don't have like the right libraries or tools to use encryption in mobile phones, and which is pretty complex, and these really deep libraries which are not there, and you find out I have to build this. And then my question to you is, don't you think that like these companies or these networks should be rewarded by the community on building this layer to enhance usability, Because what you're trying to achieve is you want to make things easier for people here, usable. But sometimes you don't have funds for doing this. You hit a wall, and then you take the shortcut. Oh, I'm gonna do less decentralized, and I'm gonna keep going, and until someone builds this for us. So what do you think about this? This is a bit philosophical, but it's hard.
Sure, you can go first.
Well, I would say that people do, building the tools are actually rewarded for it. I actually like what Darwinia did. I have no relationship with Darwinia, but they built a very critical piece that was missing in the Polkadot ecosystem. They built something called Subscan. I mean, it's not Darwinia, but it's the same team behind them that did it. So, it's for me the same. From my point of view, it is the same. By building Subscan, which is a block explorer being used by like all parachains these days, they filled a gap in the ecosystem, and that allowed them to attract not only users for Subscan, but if you think about it, that definitely attracted new users for Darwinia, that attracted marketing for the Darwinia team, because everybody is using what you are doing, basically. If we go back to another of your points about, I think you kind of mentioned briefly developer libraries. In that case, I don't think a developer library will reward you in the way Subscan did for Darwinia. It's not going to bring you marketing. It's for developers. But also developers I feel like I like to think about it like as a nice community that also help each other. And it is true that if when I'm developing, if I see a library by a project, I'm going to go and check the project anyways. And I'm probably going to, if I don't like it, or if there are bugs, if I feel like it, and if I feel very motivated, maybe I will send some patches and changes back. And that's going to help not only me, but that's also going to help the project that did that library, because suddenly they have someone else which they are not paying, which they are not working with, which they are not incentivizing, which they are not managing. That's, hey, fixing maybe a few bugs for them. In a way, that's, building in the open and benefiting from the community's effort to help you build your things. But, hey, it does. So yeah, I think, there are ways to profit from it. It's probably not a monetary reward. It's mostly fame, marketing. But if we go back to your questions on crowd loans and partition auctions, I mean, that's what's at play here. Like, we all want to have the biggest community one of the biggest communities, in order to, get enough users, get a partition slot. And we can do that by building components that are going to ultimately benefit the ecosystem. And I feel like that's a viable strategy, especially when, you go back to the Subscan case study.
All right, guys. I'd like to wrap it up here. Some housekeeping. Laszlo, Valer?
Laszlo, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. First of all, guys, thank you for this very interesting panel. Etienne, thank you for
You're welcome, sir.
making this happen.
Yeah.
Valeria,
No, you guys.
we're going to take a drink afterwards. Just in front, there's a bar called Les Petits Gros, and you're all invited. I think we booked 50 places, but still, you can come. They always make free space for good crypto people. So thank you again, guys. Thank you for coming, and see you at the bar.
Yeah, thank you.
Give a round of applause for Kenny.
Thank you, guys. Again.